Welcome, folks, to another session on research and Maplewood Flats. My name is Erwin Ostindi. I'm the president of the board of the Wild Bird Trust of BC, and grateful that people are taking time out of their lovely summer evening to express and show what science geeks that they are, that they're coming on to a Zoom event to learn about science and research methods. I'm really excited about tonight. It's a long time in coming. Chloe Hartley, who you'll be hearing from in a minute, has been working on the habitat and cultural use plan with myself and other volunteers at Maplewood Flats for a number of years now, three years. And it's exciting to see the work that Kirsten Bradford has done to advance this work this summer. And Kirsten will be, you'll be hearing from Kirsten in a minute. I do want to express my appreciation for Chloe in particular for carrying the mantle for, I guess it's 3 years now, Chloe. And that's and this work comes out of a period in time where the Wild Bird Trust of British Columbia has really transformed and grown. And nothing says that more than the fact that we're doing a habitat and cultural use plan, which really is a way to kind of consolidate our policies, our worldviews, our understanding of this particular site on the edge of the Salish Sea at Maplewood Flats. And I recall board meetings that took place before we embarked on this, where there'd be different policies being discussed, and it seemed like then the next meeting the same policy would be discussed, and it seemed to some of us that, you know, having an overarching system and a structure where the work would be guided over a decade was in order. So with that, Chloe picked up the mantle, and the Habitat Committee, which is made up of volunteers, has done that work, and it's just such a great pleasure to see it advance to this degree. I want to acknowledge that the work we do, and in particular the site, and I think the purpose of the plan is to really embrace the land acknowledgement. The fact that in the past the Wild Bird Trust and the site was in many ways stolen from the Tsleil-Waututh when it was created as a bird sanctuary. And I organized a forum, I think in 2016 at Maplewood Flats, that looked at the cultural history of the site. And there was another forum for our membership on glyphosate and invasive species. And we noted at that time that having a plan would in fact be the way that we address this issue, this disconnection with the Tsleil-Waututh. And I'm thrilled here we are 3 years later, and we're starting to understand that. And a map like that we're looking at from 1859 really, I think, shows us unmistakably how colonized so much of our resource management has been. When we look at this map, as if it's a parish in the United Kingdom in the 1600s, you know, it's this notion of enclosures, these lines on a map, the very first lines on a very first map of this form, of this style, where the assumption that the indigenous folks didn't use the land, didn't steward the land, that's steeped in terra nullius thinking. And our organization, the Wild Bird Trust of BC, approved a commitment to embrace traditional ecological knowledge in all of our work. In many ways, that's really embracing that the Tsleil-Waututh have been stewards of these lands for since time immemorial, along with the Squamish Nation and Musqueam and other Coast Salish peoples. But in particular, you look at the fact that we're really co-located with the Tsleil-Waututh. And as the president of the board, the discussions at the board level were really about who is actually advancing the mandate of our organization more, the Tsleil-Waututh or the Wild Bird Trust. And we had to really humble down and recognize that despite our pride of and all the work that we did at Maplewood Flats, in fact, the Tsleil-Waututh were actually doing more to advance our mandate, to promote biodiversity in Brard Inlet, to improve water quality in Brard Inlet, to create a better habitat for birds in Brard Inlet. And so the fact that the Tsleil-Waututh weren't embraced as part of our work, their practice, their community, all the good work that the Treaty Lands and Resources Department does at Tsleil-Waututh, the fact that we created this artificial space between ourselves and the jurisdiction that we felt we had at Maplewood Flats and the Tsleil-Waututh. Well, that is frankly steeped in colonial thinking. So the work that you're going to be hearing tonight is really 3 years ahead now, to the point where we're ready to show and learn and share and understand how Tsleil-Waututh might want to be involved at Maplewood Flats. So without any further ado, I want to pass it forward now to Kirsten Bradford. She's been working with us this summer as the coordinator of this project, and her co-facilitator tonight is our Habitat Committee Chair, Chloe Hartley. And with that, thank you, and I'm looking forward to the presentation.
Great, thanks, Erwin. So first, I'm just going to go through a quick agenda for tonight's presentation. We'll be going through a quick description of the location of the site and the history, describing the land and the people. Following that, Chloe's going to go through the site stressors, including the ecological and anthropogenic stressors that Maplewood Flats faces today. And then we'll go through a brief introduction of how the formation of the Habitat and Cultural Use Plan came to be, and kind of what sets it apart from other management documents. And then finally, we'll walk you through the vision, guiding principles, goals, and objectives of the plan. And then briefly, we'll touch on our progress and our next steps at the end. So as Erwin touched on, Maplewood Flats is situated within the traditional and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. So this is a modern day map from 2018, and you can see it in juxtaposition to the map that Erwin just had up, how much industrialization has impacted the area of Broad Inlet, and kind of, you know, just the difference we see in the habitat. And so for those of you who are not familiar with Maplewood Flats, it is a conservation area composed of 30 hectares of upland site and 96 hectares of mud flats, which extend out from the conservation area, as you can see on the map. The site is one of the few undeveloped tracts of lands of waterfront on the north shore of the Barts Inlet and supports a diversity of bird and wildlife species. The Tsleil-Waututh Nation have occupied this land and water for millennia, extending from regions of the Barts Inlet to the Indian Arm and to the Fraser River. For thousands of years, the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, or the people of the inlet, stewarded these lands and waters in and around Barts Inlet, and are leaders today in the critical environmental protection of this area. Tsleil-Waututh utilized this area of the mudflats for harvesting fish, shellfish, hunting, and cultivating and harvesting plants for food and other cultural uses. As you can see on the map here, currently, the Tsleil-Waututh community is located less than 1 kilometer east of Maplewood Flats. And so as Erwin described, just being on their land and them also being our direct neighbors, it was critical to address this relationship that we had with them moving forward in the creation of this plan. So in the late 1980s, local and Metro Vancouver residents, conservationists, and District of North Vancouver successfully lobbied to have a significant portion of the mudflat and inlet preserved, along with the marsh fragrance and a segment of filled landscape into a conservation area in 1993, which is what we now call Maplewood Flats. The establishment of Maplewood Flats in 1993 protected the land, the mudflats, and the marsh from development, but followed the same pattern of non-consultation and furthered the exclusion of Tsleil-Waututh community from their lands. So as we've spoken to, in 2017, the Wildbird Trust determined the need for the development of a long-term plan to address reconciliation with Tsleil-Waututh. So these are kind of the cultural and historic needs for this habitat and cultural use plan that we'll be discussing today. And now I'm going to pass it off to Chloe to talk about the environmental needs of the site.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Kirsten and Erwin. And I also wanted to acknowledge Alice Sun, who is our technical director tonight, making sure that helping us. Yeah, hi Alice, thank you so much. Yes, so when the board determined that there was a need to have an overall plan for the site, the first step you need to take is an assessment, a baseline of where we are now, where do we want to go to on the site and what might be impeding the journey. And we have stressors, which is sort of a term used in ecology that describes factors that might be constraining productivity of a species. It might be disrupting the stability of an ecosystem, interrupting ecological processes and functions, interfering with resilience, which is the capacity of an ecosystem to respond to a disturbance, to either resist it or to recover from a disturbance. Now we have cultural stressors. Erwin and Kirsten already mentioned the relationship with the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, and we are really wanting to address Tsleil-Waututh management and use and access of the site. Also, the demographic of the general public who's using the site, who's interested in the site, who feels comfortable visiting the site. So those are cultural stressors. But for ecological stressors, one of them, we have a huge list, but we came up with about 6 key issues. So the first one is invasive species. These are plants, I'm sure you've heard of these, most people here, but they're plants that invasive species, could be plants or animals that come into an ecosystem and can disrupt it, or can come into a disrupted ecosystem and change the nature of that ecosystem. And at Maplewood Flats, it was a disturbed site. It used to be mud flat and marsh, and it was filled. And some of the first colonizing plants there were Himalayan blackberry and English ivy. And if you go to Maplewood Flats, you'll see that blackberry is everywhere. I did a survey of the site, and the mean cover is 50% blackberry on the site. And so what you end up having is really a lack of diversity and cover of native plants. So we have a huge bloom of flowers in June, which is fabulous for bees, and a huge, wonderful crop of blackberries in August. But the other months of the year, the amount of flowering plants and fruit and cover and structure that is available is very limited because of the predominance of blackberry on site. So that's one of the key stressors that we need to address, is plant diversity and cover. A second huge stressor is climate change. Obviously, sea level rise presents an existential threat to this very low-lying piece of land, but also changing climate. So we know we're getting wetter, warmer winters and springs and hotter, drier summers. And blackberry seems to be very resilient to these stressors, but that it may actually be interfering with the capacity of new plants to get established, because it can be so hot and dry or so saturated with water in the winter. Another issue on site that we always knew there was some contamination on site of industrial materials because it was this filled site, but last year we had BCIT students, ecological restoration students, doing their capstone research on site, and they did some water quality testing and found that there was copper contamination in the wetland, and to a very high level, to the level that it was probably interfering with the capacity of some of the wetlands to support insect life and amphibians. So that's another really big stressor we're wanting to address. Kirsten, do you want to forward to the next slide? Awesome. Another big stressor is constriction, development surrounding the conservation area. If you remember the slide that Kirsten showed, you can see a lot of residential development surrounding the site, but you also see a few blocks of forest, and those forest areas are getting slowly, bit by bit, developed. And the problem with that is ecosystems don't have tend to not have distinct boundaries. Wildlife and water and soil and bacteria move up and down from the sea to the land and up to the mountains. So we have bear and deer who come up and down from the slopes of Mount Seymour down to the water. Otters, they have a sort of home range of up to 2 kilometers inland. But if this land all becomes developed, then that movement of wildlife is interrupted. So that's a really big issue that we have also identified. Fifth is industrialization of Burrard Inlet. Again, actually climate change has an impact on this because of ocean acidification, and Burrard Inlet is actually quite acidified, probably partly from climate change, but also from runoff from the urban landscape, and also probably just the actual baseline conditions of the geography of the site of the area. But so urban runoff is a big issue, and also recreational boating traffic is a huge disturbance for birds and can cause erosion. And of course, right across the water from the mudflats is the terminus of the Trans Mountain Pipeline project and the proposed twinning of this pipeline, which will result in a huge increase in tanker traffic and huge risk of a catastrophic oil spill in the inlet, and also just the day-to-day drips and slips that happen in industrial areas. So those are some big stressors on the site as far as that, the interface between the sea and the upland area, and on our bird populations. And then our sixth key site stressor that we identified that we really need to look at in this plan is managing our popularity, because we've had a huge growth in visitors over the last 10 years. It's just the number of people who have discovered this site. It's a beautiful site. It is a wonderful place to come and experience this deciduous forest, which is very unusual in our coniferous forest type that we have around here. And there's birdsong and peace and quiet and beauty, but the crowds of people are actually a stressor on the birds and on the plants, and they carry invasive species in their boots, and they disturb nesting birds and disturb the birds on the mudflat. And so that's another issue. That's the final of our key 6 site stressors that we've identified, is how to manage this increasing number of visitors to the site. Over to you, Kirsten.
Great, thanks, Chloe. So far we've kind of identified these 2 aspects. We have cultural stressors, and then we also have the ecological stressors, as Chloe just went through. And between these 2 stressors, you can see that there's a great need for a plan. And so this is kind of what arose from these stressors is the formation of the habitat and cultural use plan. So this range of ecological and anthropogenic stressors, and also a need for reconciliation with Tsleil-Waututh and for promotion of cultural continuity within Tsleil-Waututh's community and the site itself. So the vision for the habitat and cultural use plan is not for it to merely be an environmental management plan, but that it recognizes that human and nature go hand in hand, and that to properly care for this site, we really need to address our relationship with Tsleil-Waututh Nation as the first stewards of this land. So the plan addresses both cultural and ecological aspects of the site and really holds the themes of cultural continuity, reconciliation, conservation, and ecological restoration within it. The Habitat and Culture Use Plan sets a direction for Tsleil-Waututh and Wild Bird Trust to work together on a set of goals and strategies for ecological restoration, and to build agreements to manage access to the site and facilitate restoration and cultural practices of Tsleil-Waututh within the site. And then furthermore, it also addresses ecological needs, so supporting ecosystems on site from birds, wildlife, plant life, soil, and water. So again, just really holding these 2 things of culture and environment on the same level is really the view and the goal for this plan. Okay, so now we're going to move on a bit to the structure of the plan, and then we'll walk you through kind of some of the visions and the concepts within the plan. So here on my screen, you can see outlined how the plan looks today. Starting, we have Wild Bird Trust and Tsleil-Waututh protocols. And so really what this is a memorandum of understanding between Wild Bird Trust and Tsleil-Waututh on how we can work together to support Tsleil-Waututh culture and habitat conservation at Maplewood Flats. The next section is an introductory, and so this goes on to talk about the history and the location of the site, as we did earlier in our presentation. So just kind of placing ourselves within the history of colonization and within Tsleil-Waututh culture, and kind of placing ourselves today as Maplewood Flats, where we sit. And then the next section describes roles in ownership, management, and collaboration. And so there are several parties that play important roles in management, operation, and use of the landscape at Maplewood Flats. And activities of these parties inside of and outside of the conservation area impact the plan's goals. The various parties and their roles in relation to the flats are described in this section. And then the fourth section that we have is the planning process. So again, this talks about how the Habitat and Culture Use Plan arose and why was there a need for it. And then the final section describes the vision, guiding principles, and goals. And so this is really kind of like the content of the plan. And this last section we're going to go on to in a minute. But first, I wanted to draw your attention to the side panel here, where we have action plans, research side panels, and appendices. And so these are all kind of substructure of the plan, I would say. And so what we're thinking for action plans is that we're going to have a handful of numerous plans that will really detail how we're going to execute our goals and our vision. So if you think about like the Habitat and Cultural Use Plan kind of as like an overarching document, and then these action plans will really like fill in specifically how we will address the stressors and how we will reach our goals. So we will have restoration plans, cultural use plans, climate change and resilience plans, along with infrastructure maintenance plans and inventory assets. And so, yeah, like I said, that will just really provide a lot of information on how we will achieve our goals. And then the research side panels, what we're envisioning is that we will have the Habitat and Cultural Use Plan, and then dotted within the plan, within the document, we will have kind of these boxes describing research and goings-ons at the site at Maplewood Flats. For example, if somebody who had never visited Maplewood Flats, or who was new to Wild Bird Trust, was interested in the organization, they would be able to look at the Habitat and Culture Use Plan and read about our vision and our goals for the site, but also they would be able to kind of get a feel for what's going on at the site through these research projects. So things that might be showcased here are the Purple Martin Nest Boxing Project, or the monthly bird survey. So really kind of giving examples of what we do at Wild Bird Trust. And then the final kind of subcategory there is the appendices. And so this will just be a collection of different reports and information that was used to inform the plan, and that also may be of interest to readers. So that is an overview of what the structure of the plan looks like. And so now we're going to move on and talk about the vision, guiding principles, and goals of the plan. And this will just give you a better idea of where we're taking this plan and what we're trying to achieve. So the vision of the Habitat and Cultural Use Plan is as follows. Our vision is that the site reflects a resilient and thriving Coast Salish ecosystem. The Tsleil-Waututh Nation culture and use is prevalent, and the public is experiencing, learning about, and being inspired by the natural environment. So I think, as has been reflected in this conversation so far, again, we're really holding ecological and cultural aspects hand in hand through this vision. What you can see now is our 8 guiding principles. Our guiding principles uphold our vision and direct our goals and objectives. So the 8 principles represent the common values of the site, focusing on reconciliation, inclusion, holistic management, all which are themes that are involved in all of our work at Wild Bird Trust. So I'm quickly going to just talk us through each of these guiding principles. So our first guiding principle is cultural continuity. And this is really about recognizing the linkages and ongoing relationship between Tsleil-Waututh Nation and the landscape and wild bird trust. The second guiding principle is integrated management. So here we're talking about integrating Tsleil-Waututh community into site management, conservation work, educational programming, along with providing a space for cultural practices to be done. The third guiding principle is conservation. And so at World Bird Trust, conservation for us is about pairing traditional knowledge along with Western science to restore, enhance, and monitor the site and to build resilience into the future. The fourth principle is partnership. There's a lot of different parties that are involved with Wild Bird Trust and that visit the site or have a role in the site. And so what we really hope to do through our goals and through the plan is to build relationships to support our operations and learning and continue to connect with different parties to promote conservation and reconciliation. So the fifth guiding principle is sustainability. And this is really about reducing our impact on the environment, our greenhouse gases, and the impacts of site visitors so that we can create a site that is sustainable for generations to come and really promote practices that will result in a sustainable and thriving ecosystem and community. The next guiding principle is respect and connection, and this is really all about not only respecting and connecting to the land, but also to each other. So we are thinking about themes such as reconciliation, learning about Tsleil-Waututh culture, learning about ecology and conservation, and just generally together caring for the site. And then the seventh principle is accessibility. So we will create equitable access to programs for everybody so that everything that we do is accessible and everyone has equal ability to be involved and to participate. And then the last guiding principle is that the plan is adaptive. And so this means that the plan can be flexible to changes and opportunities as they arise. And it's not something that's static or just a document that we write and gets put away. It continues to change and evolve as the needs and the situation of the site changes. So these are the 8 principles, and you will see that these are all reflected throughout the 5 goals that we're going to go on to talk about as we move forward. Okay, so this is goal number 1 of 5. Goal number 1 is to conserve, restore, and monitor biodiversity and ecosystems while maintaining cultural continuity. So again, we're having restoration and conservation along with cultural continuity. In this box, you can see the 5 objectives that are paired with this goal. And really what this goal is about is assessing what the site looks like today and developing restoration plans and restoration goals in order to create a sustainable and equitable site for all that values reconciliation as well. What we hope also from this goal is to develop a climate response and resilience plan that will talk about climate change stressors to the site along with mitigation actions. And as Chloe talked about previously in the ecological stressors section, we also are going to address the connectivity between, for example, the McCartney watershed and Maplewood Flats, because, you know, conservation isn't just about what we do on our specific site. We really are thinking about like how our actions are reflected throughout the community and throughout, you know, a wider view, and also like how is conservation within our site connected to the ecosystems around us. So that's goal 1. And Chloe's going to take on goal 2.
Thanks, Kirsten. Yeah, so Kirsten and Erwin have spoken quite a bit about this already, but goal 2 is to strengthen the relationship between Tsleil-Waututh and Wild Bird Trust to support cultural continuity, restoration, and conservation efforts. this is will be a very long-term goal. Relationships is an ongoing thing that will be growing over time. We go back and forth in our conversation with Tsleil-Waututh. We have a nature house on site where we can host, where we have hosted a number of exhibits and cultural events and community events, and we're hoping to change a lot of the signage on site so that it is reflecting Tsleil-Waututh culture, and also supporting restoration of language, both the Hunkaminam language as well as Squamish, probably. We're still working on our designs and plans for that. But yes, we are, this is a sort of an ongoing incremental process of creating these linkages and trying to erase the barriers that have been put up to the community for so many years for accessing the site and being engaged in the site. You can go to the next one. Yeah, goal number 3 is to continue to strengthen our partnerships with other people in the community. So the site itself, sits, as you saw, right within the seat of Tsleil-Waututh territory. It's also within the district of North Vancouver. The property itself is bookended by 2 pieces of District of North Vancouver property, and the central portion is owned by the Port of Vancouver, but it's leased to Environment and Climate Change Canada. On behalf of Environment Canada, and also with the port, or in conjunction with the port and the District of North Vancouver. So we have, and then the water, of course, is the jurisdiction of the Port of Vancouver. So there's all of these partners that we want to build and strengthen those relationships. But we also have relationships that we're building with academic institutions. We have on our board one of the instructors, a professor from Capilano University, and already he's just bringing a great, his research skills to the site. He's bringing students, one of his students did some wonderful research on the wetlands this summer, and he'll be bringing students for learning. And also we're sort of working towards this idea that maybe the students will be helping with the monitoring of the monitoring program for our restoration plans. And then for several years, the BCIT Ecological Restoration Program has had students, we've had students come here and do their 8-month capstone research projects on site. And that's just been, definitely for the Wild Bird Trust, it's been phenomenal. We have learned so much about our site from these student projects, and we hope that the students also are appreciating the opportunity to work on site. So by having these partnerships with academic institutions, we're certainly having, expanding the number of people who know about our site, but we're also benefiting from the research and research opportunities that they can provide for us. We also are building linkages with the conservation sector. Wild Bird Trust Bird Inlet is an important bird area, which means that it holds globally significant concentrations of birds. So we have a lot of different bird and wildlife conservation groups that we can be building partnerships with that will help us with our research and monitoring and help us with restoration plans. And then of course we have Wild Bird Trust members and the residents of the Lower Mainland and tourists who come and visit here. And we want to continue to build partnerships with our visitors so that they, not only when they're on their site, that they're respecting the site and enjoying the site while they're here, but also, well, for example, we have a nursery on site where we sell Coast Salish plants. And speaking of keeping linkages between the mountains and the mud flats here, one of our goals is to have this residents of North Vancouver be buying these native plants and restoring providing wildlife habitat in their backyards. So by strengthening these partnerships with just the local people who come to the site, we are building the resilience, the ecological resilience of the site as well. Yeah, so there's an endless number of people that we are engaged with, and it's really just the limit of it's almost entirely volunteer run here, so it's the degree to which we can run these programs, it is limited by all of our participation, but it's going pretty well so far.
Great. Okay, so the next goal is goal 4, which is to foster compatible public access and opportunities to learn. Like Chloe talked about, we are involving so many people at this site and connecting with so many folks. And one of the things that we want this plan and this goal to really reflect is our ability and our desire to create more opportunities for people to come to the site and to have public education resources to learn about conservation and along with reconciliation and Tsleil-Waututh culture. And so, yeah, this is really about developing education materials for a variety of ages and a variety of learners to be able to access this information that is held within our site and within our community members and our stewards that we work with. Okay, and then the final goal is goal 5, and this goal is more about our operations, but is definitely equally as important as all the other goals, as it really sits as like a foundation piece to building the plan and building our ability to complete the other goals. So goal 5 is to complete operation requirements and projects to facilitate public enjoyment and protection of the environment. And so what the objectives really outline for this goal is like just really being able to have the structures to fulfill the other objectives that we have. So first would be strengthening and growing staffing, so developing human resources plans and employee programs to be able to build our capacity in that sense. Also, we hope to celebrate and strengthen our volunteer program. So as Chloe just spoke to, so much of our work is done by volunteers here at Wildbird Trust, and that is an extremely powerful resource that we have. And so we hope to continue to strengthen this program. We've been lucky enough to have a summer staff in the past few months, Marissa, work on this program through creating a volunteer handbook along with volunteer orientation sessions. But Goal 5 really encompasses the need to continue to build up this program. Also within Goal 5 is completing operational requirements. So this is developing a plan about site operation and can include materials as from developing safety plans to improving public access to washrooms. So just across the board, you know, how are we meeting our operational needs? And then also within Goal 5 is communication. So creating a social media plan and improving our ability to reach people through social media that may be outside kind of our Wildbird Trust bubble or group and promoting what we're doing here on site. And then finally within Goal 5 is also securing funding for operations and projects. So like we said, so much of our work is done by volunteers, and of course funding is really a critical part of our work. And so being able to have a plan that outlines how this will look in the future will be extremely beneficial to improve our efficiency on that end. So yeah, Goal 5 is kind of more an operations goal and yeah, speaks to like the structure of how we will achieve our other goals. So those are the 5 goals within the plan. As you can see, they range from ecological to cultural, education, partnerships, and operational. So really a range of how we will achieve this vision for the site. So we're nearing the end of our presentation, and I just want to briefly talk about the progress and next steps of the Habitat and Cultural Use Plan. So really where we're at now is we're hoping to advance the draft, and this really will be about engaging with Tsleil-Waututh Nation to really get their feedback on how the site reflects their culture and how how they want to be involved and how they want to use the site, so that we can really be sure that we are fully addressing this need for reconciliation as we have identified throughout this plan. And then next steps include starting to formulate the action plans. So these will be the various restoration plans on site, as Chloe talked about. This will be invasive species management to marine restoration, so a variety of different ecological plans. And then also within the action plans, we'll have the cultural use plan, and this will be a lot about collaboration with Tsleil-Waututh. And then looking forward, we'll also hope to create a climate response and resilience plan. So that is our presentation for tonight. Thank you for listening. We would love to open up to any comments or questions that people have and hear your feedback. As we have said throughout this presentation, what we really want this plan to reflect is a culture of collaboration. So we would love to hear from you.
And part of this video will also be shown and saved. So I think, in fact, while we have a modest group here today, in fact, we'll probably, this video that we're producing will actually be seen by a few hundred people. So that's why it's so instructive to kind of lay this all out and help people plug in. Kirsten, you mentioned Marissa's being involved in volunteer orientation, and it's a great time. I know she's scheduling for September and October a bunch of habitat intake workshops. So it's a super good time for folks to get involved and jump in, and whether it's with the habitat plan or just in general, it's a great time to jump in.
There was a question asking if there's a copy of the plan available, and there will be, but right now it's in draft, and we'll be working through the whole plan with Tsleil-Waututh and also with some of our partners, and probably having another little possible member or board feedback stage before it's finalized, but so keep your eyes and ears posted, alert in the next few months. We'll have copies available.
Barbara, Ariane, Jamie, questions, observations? I'll note as people get their questions ready, they can either pop them into the chat. It's impressive when I sit back and hear Kirsten and Chloe talk about it. It's impressive because it really addresses a very systems approach to the site, and I think that reflects the new way that the Wild Bird Trust is seeing the site. That it's you know, the fact that there's so much blackberry. Chloe is a bit understated in her comments on blackberries because she actually wrote her thesis on that subject, so is an expert on that issue. And the fact that we were sort of laissez-faire with allowing that much blackberry on site and thinking that actually enhanced kind of or that was a satisfactory level of biodiversity for the bird populations, rather than and now that we're embarking on this and having all these graduate students come in and do research with us, we're recognizing that the Barts Channel or other areas on the site are in desperate need of a major overhaul. Could Kirsten or Chloe, could you mention briefly about the Barts Channel as a kind of an example or a microcosm of the kind of larger systems fail that we've had? I know I'm being perhaps a bit dramatic by calling it a systems fail, but what I think this habitat plan is pointing to is that there's actually beautiful opportunities.
Yeah, so the Barts Channel, for those of you who have visited the site, is that channel that runs from Dollarton Highway to the southern mud flats. And I know personally I thought that was like some kind of like small stream the first time I visited, but actually it's it was historically used for barges to run from Burrard Inlet to a gravel pit that was on the other side of Dollarton Highway. That's why it's called the Barts Channel. And I think in this past winter, we had a group of BCIT students come and do a restoration study on the site and identified the potential for this site to be restored from its post-industrial state to an ecosystem that could host a variety of plant and fish species within the channel. And I think what Erwin's speaking to is just looking at the fact that because of the past industrialization of the site, there is like such an ecological impact there. And so how can we move this site forward through restoration to make it a more functioning ecological site, but also how can we do that in collaboration with Tsleil-Waututh to improve that continuity in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly, Kirsten. And another factor for the entire site is wanting to, it's a very small site, and with development happening and just the neighborhoods becoming more developed over time, the small bit of nature we have, we want to make sure it's like maximizing what we can have. So right now it's basically a big ditch, and there are fish come in there, there's seaweed, there's barnacles, but the restoration plan would add some structure, might add some curves in the channel, might add some cover, and then this channel that is doing something right now. It is foraging habitat for juvenile salmon that are out migrating in the spring. And the other day we had a meeting and there was this huge school more rocks and some dendritic channels and some large woody debris. We can kind of maximize that landscape that we have, and we are sort of want to extend that to the whole site, that concept of really maximizing what we have through restoration. Yeah.
I can take that question. I'm not sure if it's Jaime or Jamie, but question Jamie is asking is regarding the naming of the site. I joined late. It says, is there a plan to give the flats their original Indigenous name? It's an interesting question. It's also interesting how you phrased it, because you phrased it saying, is there a plan, which I can address, to give the flats their original Indigenous name? And so it's funny when we talk about renaming, to your question, it's actually not renaming, it's unnaming. And in many ways, we think, oh, well, we can't. There's this debate about Stanley Park and Stockwell Day. I know when he was the federal minister responsible for Stanley Park, he was like, well, we can't rename Stanley Park because it's been that name for 100 years. And ironically, of course, it's had names for thousands of years. So this kind of navel gazing that we settlers tend to do, especially when we feel like we have a piece of private property or jurisdiction, is actually getting in the way of us recognizing that the land and the mudflats actually have existing names, Tsleil-Waututh names. And so one thing that I'll just be transparent with you, at our board meeting last week, we actually discussed this very subject, and the fact that the Tsleil-Waututh village has a name, and that name encompasses the bay and the mudflats in front of the village. Well, we are actually located in that bay. So that's a name that exists. There's a traditional name for McCartney Creek. Well, McCartney Creek flows through our area. So those are, and then there's a new name that's being, so there's different ways of naming by simply acknowledging that these sites have historic names. And so your question, that's part of the plan that the Kirsten and Chloe have laid out. And that is certainly something the board is open to. And I suspect we anticipate that happening. It's not a coincidence that in 1995, just down the shoreline, the Tsleil-Waututh signed the very first First Nation Municipal Park Co-Management Agreement in BC history. That was 1995. So that's already 25 years ago. Kate's Park became Weyawichin, which is the traditional name for which refers to facing the wind, that windy corner there. So yeah, it's something that we're doing, and I think as Chloe and Kirsten have touched on, you know, when you drive down or bicycle down Dollarton Highway, you can start to experience that Tsleil-Waututh stewardship. So rather than seeing a kind of a rubby old chain link fence, I think we can actually do the site justice and public education justice by perhaps, as you're driving down, you see every 100 meters a Tsleil-Waututh icon for the plants or the birds that are actually in the habitat. So rather than seeing an old fence, we actually use that fence as a platform to do that teaching and sharing. So there's lots of opportunities for naming and unnaming and the next steps. Also, just jump in, anyone. Maybe I have an aversion to the dead space, but Chloe mentioned about the partners, and you know, we do have our landlords, Environment Canada, the District of North Vancouver, and the Port of Vancouver, and they're also keen to look at this. We have a management plan with them that we're obliged every year to discuss. This is not a management plan. This is a habitat and cultural plan. So it's not as, I think when Kirsten was talking about the kind of site-specific, case-specific study projects, like the micro projects, like the Barts Channel or the removal of the blackberry, that is more of a management plan that we'll be sharing with our landlords on an annual basis. But this is more of an overarching document that talks about the policies and values that the Wild Bird Trust carries as it has responsibility for the site. Chloe, do you want to answer that question, or?
Sure. The question, are there plans for doing work with local governments for increased protection and support of the site? We've been working quite a bit with the District of North Vancouver. They're really supportive of the conservation area. They, in their submission to the National Energy Board on the Trans Mountain Pipeline, they said that Maplewood Flats is, I forget, it was the jewel or the crown of the North Shore. So it's a site that they really value, and they've supported us in a number of ways, and we certainly want to continue to work with them for some of the supports that Kirsten mentioned, like parking, bathrooms, signage. There's a lot of things that that level of government can help us with, and also the port can help us with those kind of support. And also with the Tsleil-Waututh government as well, the Treaty Lands and Resources Department at Tsleil-Waututh has this incredible staff of really skilled environmentally like biologists and ecologists. So also looking to them for help, and also to the community for more protection and restoration of the site.
Yeah, I would add, Chloe, that you're touching on the kind of operational partnership that we want, and I think that's also, I just want to flag from my role as chairing the board of directors, that we saw that we can do this on our own, or we can actually ask our partners to show up and to be present. And I think we're negotiating with a port more now, and I think we'll be submitting our very first port funding application this fall, and that's really to say to the port, yes, you are our landlord, and you sit on a steering committee that supports the governance of the site, but in fact, with that relationship comes responsibilities, and we see that with Environment Canada, our landlord, and we see it with the District of North Vancouver. So we're asking all of those partners, all of those landlords, to support us in, reaching higher, doing better work, and sharing the joy of doing good work. And we're really proud of the work that we're doing. What Kirsten and Chloe has laid out is, I feel very proud of it. The board feels very proud of it, and we want our landlords to feel very proud of it. and our landlords also have purse strings. And so with that responsibility comes partnering on this kind of work. And so I think it behooves us, and I think Chloe's been really instrumental in this leadership, articulating values and principles of how we do management. And so when we are speaking to the Port of Vancouver, we can talk about our objectives and why it's important to improve the Barts Channel. You know, not simply as a make work project for volunteers to learn about citizen science in their backyard, but actually how that'll improve the value of Burrard Inlet, the ecological value of Burrard Inlet. So there's opportunities for all of our landlords to kind of show up, participate in this, and it behooves upon us then to actually do good scientific research and prepare ourselves to have that level of partnership.
All right. Thanks to everyone. Thank you all for coming and listening. Thank you, Kirsten, so much for preparing this presentation, and Alice for supporting it, and Erwin. Yeah, I just wanted to add too that I'm really excited that the work Kirsten's done on the plan over the summer, and really looking forward to having this plan move forward and towards printing at some point.
Yeah, and people can, I guess, email habitat@wildbirdtrust.org, and that'll be in the description. So if you're wanting to make sure you get connected to when there's the next presentation on this, because we'll be involving the Tsleil-Waututh, we'll be involving the government stakeholders, but we really want to involve our membership as much as possible as well. So do send us an email, habitat@wildbirdtrust.org, and also look for Marissa's workshops. There'll be volunteer intakes in September and October. Great opportunities to get involved. There's a beautiful nursery growth project that we're doing with a beautiful demonstration garden that we're building this fall and winter. So it's a super exciting, we didn't talk about it today, but it's, in terms of the case study, it's a really beautiful case study, planting a whole area of an interpretive demonstration garden around native plants. So that's going to be happening. If you'd like to be involved in that, do give us a shout as well.